Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
It's a media onslaught. Every opportunity to smear conservatives, whether valid or not, is taken to belittle, berate, and ultimately silence conservative voices. I'm Mark Angelidi, standing in for host Tim Donner on this, Liberty Nation Radio, heard coast to coast on the Radio American network. Now, this kind of attack is as old as politics itself, from the floor of the Roman Senate to the steps of Capitol Hill today. We see broad brushstrokes of infamy aimed at political opponents. Now, to help us lift the veil a little, we're joined by Liberty Nation's socio-political correspondent and host of the Fresh Perspective podcast, Mr. Jeff Charles. Welcome, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It'll be fun.
Let's hope so. Now, Jeff, I get the political fundraising value in having your enemies cut off from the, let's call it the usual lines of communication, whether that's appearing on TV shows, using social media, things like this, even the town square, if you will. But why is the once vaunted, once respected Fourth Estate playing along with these particular machinations?
Yeah, so I mean, the media has always had issues with this, even from its inception. I mean, it's hard to remove bias completely. I mean, but you also had, back in the early 1900s with the war between William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer, all the way up until now. But the difference is that what we're seeing now over the past few years, the media has gone from being a journalistic outlet. They've gone from that to being more like activists. People think that I'm being tongue-in-cheek when I call it the activist media, but most of the time I'm not. I mean, this is what we have here. We have activists masquerading as journalists, getting in front of cameras and promoting a specific agenda that is designed to empower a group of people, a political party or a political agenda. So that's why we're seeing more and more that they are going along with this tendency, because they're not here to inform us anymore. They're here to influence us.
Yeah, the great influences of the Fourth Estate. It does seem that these pundits and producers of the legacy media, they almost want to lampoon anybody who has a conservative opinion. We see it when almost any conservative says one thing that is out of line from the postage stamp consensus. I mean, is this to discourage folks from having these opinions or from being able to voice them? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think they are trying to use persuasion to get people to think in the way that they want, but they know that they can't persuade everybody. So the objective really is to cow people into not expressing these opinions, but also into ensuring that the ones who do are not taken seriously. It's the same tactic that the government has used in the past when they invented the term conspiracy theory, so that if somebody accuses the government of doing something wrong, or they accuse government officials of engaging in malfeasance, they can just say, oh, he's a conspiracy theorist. Now, I understand that, I mean, a lot of conspiracy theories I'm not a conspiracy theory guy, but still, the tactic is the same. So, I mean, you look at the recent developments with what has come to light about the coronavirus pandemic. And now people are more open to the idea that maybe it was developed in a lab, that it's possible. Before, they were mocking people for saying that. They were trying to make sure that these people were not taken seriously.
Specifically, President Donald Trump at the time, when he said, if he was asked if he'd seen any evidence that would suggest that it was more than likely a lab outbreak rather than something that naturally occurred. Zootopic, I believe, is the term. And he was roundly mocked for it, as you say, as a conspiracy theorist. And now watching CNN, which I do for your benefit, listeners, I hear that they're now trying to say, sure, but when Trump was doing it, he was basically just being a racist about it. As opposed to he was, so we don't know what the
spin mode.
Yeah, we don't know what the final result is on that yet. But it does seem to be now that people, let's call them those who are on the postage stamp consensus, are allowed to talk about it or are talking about it. It seems that everyone else can talk about it as well. So it's very much a gatekeeping role for many in the media, or so it seems. I mean, there's always been this low-level Cold War of ideas between the right and the left. But I don't see, and you write about this a lot, Jeff. I don't see much in the way of the political right putting up a solid fight against the left. Now, I want to talk about why that is. Are they perhaps channeling Michelle Obama and deciding that they'll go high when the left goes low? Now, everything we know about politicians in general tells us that's probably not the case. So what is it, Jeff?
I think it's a level of ineptitude, to be honest. I mean, I hate to put it that way, but I think that's what's going on. I mean, for the past few decades, for the longest time, the right has been more of a reactionary force. Now, this doesn't apply to everybody on the right. It doesn't apply to all right-wing historical figures. But in general, the way it goes is there's a problem that needs to be solved, that America is facing, or that Americans are facing. The Democrats come up with an idea to fix it. And this idea is usually involving more government involvement in our lives. And it's undesirable. It may do a level of good, but the harm outweighs the good. But then on the right, our contribution to the conversation is just saying the Democrats' idea is bad, it's horrible, and we shouldn't do it. But conservatives don't put forth an alternative idea to say, hey, this is a conservative solution to the problem that America is facing. So in the end, we either get more big government and the problem is still there, or we get nothing and the problem is still there. And conservatives aren't seeking solutions to these problems. It's not that we don't have the solutions, is that we are very poor at selling these solutions.
There's a well-known British author and conspiracy theorist, David Icke, who says that he says that he has a good idea of where society goes because what he calls problem reaction solutions. So there's an almost invented problem that provokes an expected reaction. Oh my goodness, this is so bad. Somebody's got to do something about it. And then, of course, all of a sudden, the political right or the political left, they turn up with the solution, which is what they wanted when they exacerbated the problem in the first place. Right. It goes everywhere, this conversation, Jeff. So, Jeff, let's broaden this topic even wider than it is right now. Now, political ideas, they don't have to be left or right, do they? I mean, surely what lawmakers of all stripes should be doing is trying to strengthen the Constitution and the founding documents in general of the Republic. But do the denizens of Capitol Hill believe that this is actually what they're doing, that they're strengthening the Constitution, albeit through their own veil of experience?
That's a very good question. I mean, you brought up, the Roman Republic earlier. And back then, I mean, it's the same then as it is now. I mean, I think a lot of these people, probably even most of these people in Capitol Hill, are just there for clout. They're there for power. And then you also have people who are the true believers. And then you have the true believers who end up becoming the people who just want power and clout. So, I mean, as far as ideas go, there are ideas that are put forth more by the right, and then ideas that are put forth more by the left. But again, the in-between is where we're supposed to be trying to solve these problems, and we're not. And we're supposed to be trying to strengthen the Constitution and make sure that the government is in its proper role as far as the Constitution goes. But I think for a lot of these people, they don't really care about that. And that's on the left and the right. Yes,
it does seem quite cyclical and getting nowhere.
As I stated, there's nothing new under the sun.
As says the Rabbit Hole podcast, which everybody should listen to, the Rabbit Hole Politics and Prose, hosted by me, Mark Angelides. Now, last question, Jeff. What can John and Jill and Susie Q public do to avoid getting caught in the crossfire?
I would say to focus locally. We get so caught up in federal elections. I mean, we've got the most voter turnout when the presidency is on the line. And honestly, we are obsessed with the presidency far more than we should be. That role.
But by we, you mean the conservative movement in general, right?
I would say America in general. I mean, just in general, we are too obsessed with the presidency. I mean, that position was never meant to have that level of power, and yet we seem to think that everything revolves around it. I mean, that's not a king. It's somebody who's supposed to do a job, but but your local politics affects your life far more than Joe Biden or Trump or anybody else could ever affect it. So I would say if there, because I do believe that there are people on both the right and the left who want to actually deal with a lot of the problems that we face, but unfortunately, we focus on the wrong solution. So I think once we start focusing more on our communities and on our neighborhoods and on, yes, our mayors and our city council, then we can actually break free of a lot of this, I hate you because you're on the right, I hate you because you're on the left, you're a communist, you're a Nazi, blah, 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 blah.
And we can just hate our neighbors for who they are.
Yes, exactly. That's progress.
Jeff Charles, thank you ever so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Who are we? We are Americans that believe in liberty. We are a project of the nonprofit One Generation Away. We are patriots who apply the founding principles to the issues of today.
And they keep moving the goalposts on us.
We are educators and commentators who love America and the Constitution. Who are we? We are Liberty Nation.